Hey everybody, KC here. So today, part two of my conversation with Randy Fields, the CEO of ReposiTrak, as we talk about FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, and the demands that it is going to put on retailers, wholesalers, suppliers, and producers. Enjoy.
Good.
When we started talking about this all those years ago, um, two of the things that I remember coming up, and I think this came up when we had our very first conversation. I can remember sitting in New York City with you and Mike Levitt talking about this, on a rainy winter day. And I mean, there were two things that came out. First of all, the requirement as part of the FSMA was that, I don't think it's part of 204, but part of it was that if the Food and Drug Administration maybe or the government came and said, "Hey, listen, we need to see your records to make sure you're up to date," you would have something like 24 to 48 hours to produce those
Right.
records.
Yep.
And if you were unable to produce those records, um, perp walks were possible,
Yep.
including perp walks of CEOs. I mean,
Yep.
remember that was what
Yep.
we were talking about then.
Yep.
Is that still the case? If retailers and suppliers and wholesalers, if they cannot provide the data and are not able to act on the demands of Rule 204 and broader FSMA, is that still possible?
Well, I think there's some questions about that. They clearly will have the right to shut you down if you don't produce the records for traceability. And I want to talk about the scale of that in a moment because it seems easy until you think of the scale. They clearly will have the ability to fine, and they recognize the power of the purse. But the whole of FSMA gives them criminal authorization to prosecute as well. It's not clear they would use that with traceability. Here's the problem. Imagine you are a large wholesaler, because this is where the problem is going to show up. And let's suppose you have 3,000 or 4,000 retail stores that you service as a wholesaler. And let's imagine you have, say, 10 distribution centers from which you service those retailers. Just take a wild ass guess as to how many transactions you will have to record each year. Start at 70 million. 70 million records you will have to keep. 7 million zero records, 70 million records that have to be accurate. How about this? When we explain this to our customers, they look like deer in the headlights in this sense. We say, okay, how effective are you at what you do? And they all go, oh, we're very efficient. We say, terrific. 2% error rate, you pick it. 2%? Yeah, okay, 2%. That's a lie. It's always 5 or 8. But assume it's only 2%. What's 2% of 70 million records? 1.4 million records per year. Who is going to call or email or visit to fix 1.4 million erroneous records that are now in your database? So even if you could do this, even if you could figure out how to get around this scanning as we have, even if you could figure out what to do about the storage, how do you fix 1.4 million records? To give you an idea, if you can imagine someone sitting and dialing for dollars, as it were, and they could do 32 effective phone calls a day, that means that wholesaler will have to hire 70 or 80 people to be on the phone all day, every day, in order to fix the records. It's a huge burden. It's very difficult.
To what extent does this seep down to the consumer level? In other words, if I bought that romaine lettuce, are they required to be able to go into their transaction records to say, oh, Kevin bought romaine lettuce, we need to reach out to him?
No,
they're not. Okay.
So you have a disconnect from, think of it as inbound record keeping up to the store, but no real requirement from the store to the consumer. So the chain gets broken. Also, the FDA approached this in a way, and I have no idea exactly why. I think they may have been thinking of goofball solutions like blockchain and other weird ideas, that each supply chain for a product, a bag of salad,
Right.
somehow is independent of all of the rest of the bags of salad. In other words, they're not really gathering mass data that they could do analytics on so they could find out why are we having these problems. So I'm not sure that the FDA approach initially is the one that leads to the best analytic and risk avoidance, but it certainly will lead to an enormous amount of problems for retailers.
You talked about scale before. One of the things that occurs to me as we're talking here is in the 28 months left until, okay, now everything's got to be online and workable. Is it even possible for an industry that has not that has largely not yet laid the foundation to build this structure? Is it even possible to build the structure so it's ready in time? And
Well,
I know,
here's how,
and let's be clear, part of the ReposiTrak value proposition is we can put the house up faster and in more places
correct,
than anybody else. I get
correct,
that. So
correct.
I know the answer is going to be self-serving in the best possible way, but I just even wonder if it's possible.
Well, here's what we say to people, and we're pretty much transparent on this, that if you have scale, and let's say what's the definition of scale? More than 100 stores, at least one DC is a retailer, and obviously much larger than that if you're a wholesaler. If you are at scale in your business and you don't get started doing this, because remember, retail store receiving is going to be transformed. We've got an interesting technology that will enable that, but we just think people are making an enormous mistake by not getting going. And if you said, will the industry make it? The answer is no, not all of the industry. In fact, some customers actually ask us, what's the penalty for failure? And I'm not sure that's a good strategy to have the FDA come after you for food safety violations.
That doesn't surprise me though, because we all know there are companies out there that will say, okay, I'm going to get nailed on this, but at the end of the day, paying the fines is less expensive than following, than living up to the mandates of the law. Now, there's a point at which that maybe there's a tipping point where that doesn't make any sense anymore.
Right.
That is not an unheard of approach to business in the United States of America.
Right. I just don't think I want to be a retailer, because what we know, we're very confident, the FDA is going to pick a few to prosecute.
Right.
In whatever way, civilly or however they go after them. I don't think I want to be a headline in the New York Times that the FDA is trying to shut me down because of food safety violations. They're smarter than they used to be. They recognize that the value of your brand equity and your safety profile is important. So I suspect that people are going to want to get something done as rapidly as they can. And probably the best preventative measure is to be somewhere in the process of implementation. I think if I were the FDA and I approached a company 3 years from now or whatever the date is, and they said, yeah, we're still looking at our alternatives, I'd say, well, it's too late.
Right.
On the other hand, if they said we're almost done with our implementation, we're just a few months away, I think I'd let it lie. They're rational people. I've been very impressed in conversations with the FDA, and we do it pretty frequently. They're smart. They know exactly what they're doing. They recognize the difficulty. And their point is this: we've talked about this for years.
Right.
So somebody saying they haven't looked at alternatives yet just seems nonsensical. I will say this: the FDA is not as aware as they ought to be as to the level of not being prepared. I was on a panel of 20 experts that the FDA hired. I got some of your taxpayer money, by the way.
You're welcome to it.
Yeah, thank you. It was just about enough to get a Starbucks coffee. So what in this panel, they asked the panel of 20 so-called experts, what percentage of retailers today already can do full end-to-end traceability? 19
living up to Rule 204.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. 19 of the 20 said 90% of retailers can do it. One person, the outlier, yours truly, said 0. Nobody can do it. So you do just what you do with an outlier. You say, this guy must be nuts or stupid or unaware. I said, these are my customers. I would know if they could do this. They can't. So the FDA marched ahead without knowing the level of inability to execute today.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, yes. I mean, one reaction to that is the outlier must not know what he's talking about.
Correct.
The other response to it, which maybe is not the natural governmental response to it, is just what does this guy know that the
That
other
we
19
don't.
people don't know?
Yeah.
But you're right. But at some point, that again, the chickens will come home to roost. Just a couple of quick things. Is this all fresh? We talked about categories before. Is this all fresh product, or does it cover
No.
any of its package?
No, I don't know if you would consider mozzarella cheese or cottage cheese fresh. It's
Okay.
it's soft cheeses of
At some stores more than others.
Basically, it covers a range of categories of products. And then it says if there's no kill step involved, meaning heating it to 165 for a period of time, then that product must be traced kind of end to end. People have made some decisions, not without good reason, in the produce world. The produce world knew this was coming. They've done an excellent job overall. But an example is a lot of produce companies. Here's an example of unintended consequence. Produce companies are often paranoid that the retailer will work around them, will try to go to their source if they're a wholesaler or distributor of produce products. So they're afraid that if they sell celery to a retailer, the retailer will say, what the hell do I need you for? I'll go find out. Show me who it is you buy it from. I'll go buy it from them directly. Now, here's what happens, therefore. Produce distributors, processors, whatever you want to call them, have been taking the traceability code from the guy who grows the product, storing that nowhere, or maybe somewhere on a piece of paper, and then putting their own traceability lot code on it so that no one can tell where the product really came from. I don't know if I explained that very intelligently. So you sell celery to a supermarket chain. If you look at the package, you cannot tell where that came from.
Right.
The batch lot code was created by the distributor. That's illegal. They can't do that now. So they have to pass, for the most part, there's nuances to this, but they have to take the batch lot code from the grower in this case, and that becomes the end-to-end traceability lot code. Whoops. So all your systems were built on hiding information, and now the transparency is about to increase immensely. Seafood, oh my God, seafood. What a problem this is going to be, because if you think about a processor, he buys seafood, if he's good, off the boat. He has 100 different boats he buys from. So this fundamentally changes the record keeping in the system. And for reasons I'm not quite sure, I don't think people understood when they installed systems to do this, that they weren't doing it correctly. And now we're about to pay the price on that.
I'm surprised when you say that some distributors are concerned that the retailers, or I guess the wholesalers, are going to go direct, right?
Yep.
Because it seems to me that that's the last thing a retail. I mean, there are some retailers who have direct relationships with growers, with fishmongers. I mean, and cattle and cattle ranches, right?
Yep.
But most of them want to go through distributors because they don't need that extra level of, they don't need to internalize that extra headache, right? That extra layer of bureaucracy. They want somebody else to handle it for them. But but that could change if that layer of bureaucracy makes them more vulnerable, not less so.
Well, I think the world is mixed on that. It certainly makes your life easy as a retailer to buy from somebody, let's call them an aggregator.
Right.
On the other hand, if your margins are critically important, you often try to source independently. And frankly, COVID didn't do anything for increasing supply chain comfort. So more people were looking around.
Right.
And to a certain extent, this is a historical paranoia. But it's real. It's there. When we ask people, why do you change the code? Why don't you just use the code that was given to you? And they say, because we're afraid our customers will try and go around us. So I'm just giving that as that's not a universal issue. It is an issue, but there's a myriad of these little things. How about this? People put labels on stuff. What percentage of labels? Now you have to think about, are produce cases typically damp? Yes. How about seafood cases? Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
So what happens to a label on a wet case? Does it smear? Uh-huh. Does it fall off? Uh-huh. Now what? So in other words, the number of special handling situations is going to be vastly different than it's been. And it's very hard to run a distribution center at scale toward productivity when you've got all of these exceptions to handle. And that was we had a group of our customers we called the FTLC, Food Traceability Leadership Consortium, who came to us 2 years ago and just said, you guys might have the key to the kingdom on this, because under the way we see Rule 204 coming, it destroys the economics of our business. So we need something that will permit us to continue in business and not pass any cost increases on to the consumer. So it has to be easy and as close to free as we can get. And that was the challenge. And luckily, we had really been prepared for this 9 years ago with Mike Levitt. This is what we prepared for, and now it's here. Now it's here.
So this has been fascinating, and a conversation that this is your business, and you have been remarkably uncommercial about it. So very quickly as we wrap up, people want to know what to do, and hopefully we've scared the crap out of some people. What should they do? How do they reach out to you? Where do they go? Where do they go get more information about what they need to do going forward?
Well, one of two things.
Because the clock quite literally is ticking.
Yeah. They could call Ghostbusters. That might help. Or they can call us at ReposiTrak. Okay. And by the way, there's essentially no charge for most of the work that we do with either retailers or wholesalers. It is actually very close to free. We do charge suppliers something that's nominal. And to be clear, we're creating a network. We have, you're probably not aware of the scale. Even I was not aware of how dominant we've become in the business. We have 110,000 facilities in our network, 30,000 supplier companies. And the reality for us is that, therefore, it's a little bit easier for us to implement. What happens then is this: somebody calls us, we charge a supplier $179 a month, unlimited use. So if he sells 1 million cases a month to 1,000 customers who are in our network, it's $179. So it's pretty close to free for the suppliers, essentially little or no cost to retailers. So we're winning. I think the last we counted, if you think of the number of supermarkets as buildings, we're at about an 8% share of the industry right now. Given what's in our pipeline, I'm guessing that by June we're at about 15. And I'll bet by year end we're at 40 or 50% of the industry using our technology. Some people will also do labeling, that's fine, but we'll ride over and above the labeling systems to enable people to communicate with their customers less expensively. Well,
this has been, I have to say, it's been an interesting ride, considering how long you and I have been talking about this. And I really appreciate you coming on Morning Newsbeat to kind of lay it out what the challenge is. It sounds like you're going to have a busy 2+ years, though. It's gonna be a little crazy.
Close. I think it's going to be really crazy. We're already trying to figure out, given our customer set, who we can get done and the people who are going to be left aside. The restaurant industry has a major problem with all this. So we're just getting started, but we feel pretty good about where we are.
Randy, thanks so much for doing this. I do think you have to go walk your dog, though, because I could hear him or her, letting you know that in the background.
Thanks, Kevin.
Take care. Thanks again.
Of course. Thank you.